You're standing in an open field. Nothing in your hands, no claws, no fangs, no armor, just skin. And yet, somewhere out there, a 6-ton elephant catches your scent and walks the other way. Not because you're loud, not because you're fast, because something ancient in its nervous system recognizes you as a threat it can't afford to test. Your ancestors didn't survive by being the strongest animal on this planet. They survived by becoming the one thing every other animal learned to fear. How does a naked, slow, clawless creature end up at the top of every predator's avoid list? For a long time, the story went like this. Your ancestors were the prey. Hiding in caves, trembling at every sound, surviving by luck more than skill. But that assumption turned out to be wrong. Very wrong. In 2004, Dennis Bramble and Daniel Lieberman published research in Nature showing that Homo sapiens possessed a biological engine no other predator on Earth had. The ability to run any animal to death across open ground. Not by being faster, but by refusing to stop. That single ability rewired the entire food chain, and speed, it turns out, was never the point. Endurance was the weapon. But here's what nobody talks about. Running was just the beginning. Picture a lion chasing a wildebeest, explosive, violent. Over in 30 seconds or the lion goes hungry. That's how almost every predator on Earth hunts. One burst, one shot, done. Your ancestors hunted nothing like that. Persistence hunting works on a single brutal principle. You don't need to be faster than your prey. You just need to be running when they can't anymore. A horse sprints at 70 kilometers are impressive, but after 6 kilometers of full sprint, its body temperature spikes past the point of recovery. A kudu can hit 80 kilometers in a straight line, but in 15 minutes of sustained chase under midday sun, it overheats and stops. Your ancestors didn't stop. Bramble and Lieberman's 2004 paper in Nature documented exactly why. Homo sapiens is the only mammal on Earth built to cool itself while running, 2 million of sweat glands. Upright posture reducing sun exposure. Feet designed for long-distance impact absorption. No fur-trapping heat. While every other animal on the savanna was panting and collapsing, your ancestors were still moving, still tracking, still coming. The prey didn't die from a single wound. It died from the exhaustion of being chased by something that simply wouldn't stop existing behind it. But here's what nobody talks about. The animal didn't just lose the race, it died confused. Nothing in its evolutionary history had prepared it for a predator that hunted with patience instead of power. And that confusion, your legs still carry it. Persistence hunting was terrifying, but it had a limit. You had to get close enough to finish the kill. That changed around 30,000 years ago with a piece of technology so simple it looks like a stick. The atlatl, a handheld lever that extends the arc of a throw, transformed everything. John Whitaker's experimental research documented that atlatl darts could reach targets beyond 40 meters, farther than most hunters could throw by hand and with enough force to bring down large game. Think about what that meant for every large animal on Earth. Before the atlatl, a mammoth had one job: stay away from things with teeth. After the atlatl, there was nowhere safe to stand. Death arrived from a distance the mammoth's senses weren't built to process. No smell warning, no sound in time to react, just impact from empty air. Then fire changed the equation again. Richard Wrangham's 2009 book, Catching Fire, argued that controlled fire didn't just cook food, it restructured the entire logic of night. Before fire, darkness belonged to predators. Big cats, hyenas, wolves, their eyes owned the night. Your ancestors owned nothing after sunset. Fire flipped that completely. A lit camp at night became a perimeter. Predators that hunted by ambush suddenly had no darkness to hide in. The hunters became the ones being watched from the edge of the light. Seen but not seeing. And for the first time in the history of this planet, a prey animal turned the night into its own territory. But what came next made fire and the atlatl look like minor upgrades. A wolf pack coordinates, orca's coordinate, chimpanzee's coordinate. But every one of these species coordinates around what they can see, hear, and smell right now. Your ancestors did something no other species on Earth has ever done. They planned hunts that hadn't happened yet, in locations none of them had seen, using roles assigned to individuals who wouldn't meet until the day of the hunt. Yuval Noah Harari's Sapiens calls this the cognitive revolution, the ability to believe in and act upon things that exist only in the imagination. A wolf pack has 10 to 15 members. That's the ceiling of coordination for almost every social predator. Your ancestors could organize 50, 80, 100 individuals around a single hunt. They could drive entire herds off cliffs. They could block migration corridors. They could split, flank, and seal an escape route that the prey had used safely for generations because they'd talked about it the night before around a fire, using words. No mammoth, no cave bear, no predator in Earth's history had ever faced an enemy that could discuss strategy. But here's what nobody talks about. Language didn't just make hunting more efficient. It made the threat permanent. Because now your ancestors could warn each other about prey that fought back, share information about migration patterns across seasons, and teach their children exactly how to dismantle an animal 3 times their size. The knowledge didn't die with the hunter. It compounded. Every generation became more dangerous than the last, and the animals had no equivalent. No way to pass down avoid the 2-legged ones. No way to adapt fast enough. This is still running inside you. Every time you explain something to another person, every time you follow a plan made by someone you've never met, you're using the same cognitive architecture that made your ancestors the most dangerous thing this planet had ever produced. If you want to know exactly how dangerous your ancestors were, look at what happened every single time they arrived somewhere new. Richard Roberts and colleagues published in Science in 2001 an analysis of megafauna extinction in Australia. When your ancestors arrived roughly 46,000 years ago, Australia's megafauna collapsed. Roberts and colleagues documented in Science in 2001 that every land mammal, reptile, and bird weighing over 100 kilograms perished, gone from a continent they'd ruled for millions of years. The same pattern repeated in North America. Anthony Barnosky and colleagues documented in Science in 2004 that at least 32 genera of large mammals, mammoths, mastodons, giant ground sloths, American camels, vanished around 10,500 to 11,000 years ago, coinciding with the first humans spreading across the continent. The critical detail is this: Australian and American megafauna hadn't evolved alongside humans. They had no inherited fear response, no instinct to run. They stood their ground the way they'd always stood their ground against every other predator. And that instinct, unchanged for millions of years, got every single one of them killed. African and Asian megafauna survived in higher numbers precisely because they'd spent hundreds of thousands of years evolving alongside your ancestors. They'd learned. The ones that didn't run when they smelled a human were already gone from the gene pool. What remained were the ones with fear baked into their biology. That 6-ton elephant walking away from your scent, it's not being cautious. It's carrying the memory of every ancestor that didn't walk away and didn't survive the choice. Your body doesn't know it's to 2024. It doesn't know about supermarkets or fences or the fact that you haven't personally chased anything to death in your entire life. It only knows what 2 million years of selection pressure wrote into it. Those 2 million of sweat glands are still there. That upright posture is still there. The feet built for 40 kilometers of continuous ground contact, still there. Drop your ancestors into a modern city and they'd be lost within an hour. Drop you onto an open savanna with a spear and 30 people who speak your language, and something older than your conscious mind would start calculating wind direction. The gap between that animal's last footprint and this one, you wouldn't think it, you'd feel it. Because the most dangerous predator this planet ever produced didn't build its power in a lab or a factory. It built it in you, 2 million years. That's how long it took to build what you're carrying, not claws, not fangs. Something harder to see and harder to stop. A mind that plans, a body that endures, and a voice that turns strangers into allies. Every large animal that ever stood its ground against your ancestors is gone. What remains are the ones that learn to run. And somewhere in the biology of this planet, in the nervous systems of elephants and wolves, and every creature that still flinches at human scent, your ancestors left a signature, one that never needed a name,